Hello, I'm Dr. Joe Arminio. Welcome to my channel, America Resurgent. I begin this video with this unwelcome thought. The capture of the Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro on January 3 is nothing to celebrate. The ease with which we apprehended him should remind us of the swift capture of Baghdad in 2003 and of the horror that followed. More to the point, it should wake us up to this frightful analogy. America, I suggest, is intervening in Venezuela for essentially the same dubious, deeper reason that it threw its might against Iraq a generation ago. The reason is rarely spoken of in public. Mustn't less ordinary folks like you and I have a clue about what is really going on? It's all about something central to America's power and especially central to the power of high finance. It's about the petrodollar system. I fear we are waging this dubious kind of war again, a petrodollar war. Only this war is for still higher stakes. This time, we risk far more chips at the gambler's table. As this video unfolds, I hope that you will better appreciate the importance of an independent press. And please show your appreciation by leaving a comment and by liking and subscribing. Together, let's advance the American cause. Now back to this video's topic. I suggest that we examine the analogy between the interventions in Iraq and Venezuela from several angles. Let's start with what is more pedestrian. Believe me, there is nothing comforting about the pedestrian perspectives. Regarding both Iraq and Venezuela, we are talking about our involvement in all-out wars. Everybody agrees that what happened in Iraq was war. This talk about a police action in Venezuela is nonsense. We brought Venezuela under naval blockade and subsequently shot our way into a sovereign country and overthrew their government, or at any rate captured their leader. What comes next? We will temporarily run, those are the words used, temporarily run Venezuela, says Mr. Trump. In all likelihood, the fighting has just begun. This brings me to the issue of legality, specifically of constitutionality. Both wars are unlawful, that is, unconstitutional. In the case of Iraq, the then President Bush sought and received a blank check from Congress. He was authorized to declare war if and when he saw fit, which is a false authorization. Only Congress can declare war. In the case of Venezuela, Congress has yet to declare war. Instead, the slimmest of majorities in each chamber has voted down several efforts to block the chief executive's use of force without a declaration of war. Thus, we have started with a few pedestrian similarities between the Iraq War and the Venezuela War, and they are frightening. America has embarked upon another war with all the ill consequences that typically entails. On top of that, the federal government sullens and stomps upon the Constitution yet again, which casts us in the role of aggressor in South America, which can only embolden aggressions by other governments, and which ought to cause the public here at home to worry about other laws that our fine government might flaunt as well. I turn now to the heart of the analogy between war in Venezuela and in Iraq. The unspoken motive that drove the executive branch back then is most likely, very likely, the same unspoken motive that drives the executive branch now. In a word, it is all about holding together this arrangement that is central to U.S. world dominance. It is all about holding together the petrodollar system. Like Iraq back then, Venezuela today is threatening to shake up this system, and the U.S. elite will not stand for it. I discussed this system in my previous video. I feel it a matter of great necessity to address this system again. Here is the essential context regarding the petrodollar system. The petrodollar is the practice of denominating the sale of oil in dollars. The petrodollar system is a cartel involving the United States and major oil-producing countries such as Venezuela and Iraq. Under this system, oil is sold exclusively or nearly exclusively in US dollars, which in turn creates a massive global demand for dollars. Without getting into all the details, I shared some of these details in my previous video. Understand that the more the world covets the dollar, the better for our own economy and especially for the US financial elite. Let's take stock of what I have said to this point. Had you heard of the petrodollar system before watching this video? Do you agree with me or not that the president is waging an unconstitutional war in Venezuela? I invite you to address these questions in the comment sections below this video. In November 2000, the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein quit the petrodollar system and jumped to the then emerging rival to the system. He elected to redominate the sale of Iraq oil in euros. It took the Bush administration about 2 years to maneuver our country, I should say manipulate our country, into backing retaliation against and the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. In spring 2025, Venezuela pushed very hard for entry into BRICS, which is this immense, relatively new alliance of 10 countries, which is building a global alternative to the petrodollar system, and which is bent on massively reducing global reliance on the US dollar. About 6 months after Maduro made this strong bid to join BRICS, the Trump administration resorted to escalating violence to convince the public that Maduro must go. This escalation, this maneuver began with unlawful strikes against small craft coming out of Venezuela. It turns out that Venezuela is no ordinary member of the petrodollar system today, just as Iraq was no ordinary member of the system back 20 or more years ago. Iraq was and still is crucial, especially for strategic reasons. Iraq sits right in the middle of Persian Gulf oil. To invade and occupy Iraq, as we did in 2003, was to preserve the petrodollar system by force of arms. For not only was Iraq returned to the system, but also other countries, which might otherwise have quit the system too, were intimidated, coerced to remain loyal and compliant within the petrodollar system. Venezuela is important to the petrodollar system more for the size of its proven oil reserves. They are the largest in the world. How large? Consider this. Venezuelan reserves could meet all Red China's oil needs at the present rate of consumption for 100 years. Red China, by the way, which is the leading member of BRICS, is heavily commercially involved in Venezuela and consumes approximately 75% of Venezuelan oil exports. Just as the defection of Iraq from the petrodollar about a generation ago gave ideas to other oil-producing members of the petrodollar system to leave the system, so too the defection of Venezuela today would give ideas to others to defect. Among those who might defect is none other than the premier oil-producing state, Saudi Arabia. In fact, the Saudi royalty is wavering in its support for the petrodollar and is being heavily wooed by BRICS. The stakes regarding Venezuela are very high, just as the stakes were high with Iraq in 2003. By the early 2000s, the petrodollar system was wobbling. The Nixon administration brought about the system in 1974. They induced first Saudi Arabia and then other oil-producing countries to join the system. It wasn't long before the U.S. began to abuse the arrangement due to ballooning U.S. debt. By the year 2000, the oil producer members of the petrodollar system were grumbling. Among them, Iraq had had enough and left. The challenge now as in the early 2000s, is how to maintain the appeal of the US dollar when inducement is failing. Evidently, the Trump administration is no different than any of its predecessors dating back to 1974, insofar as it intends to continue to rely on the petrodollar. It appears to be taking after the George W. Bush administration, insofar as it intends to hold the system together by force. The danger of undertaking a facsimile of what we did in Iraq in 2003 is very real. And then some. If regime change in Caracas does not go smoothly, if we get deeply drawn in, like we did in Iraq from 2003 to 2007, the price could be awful. For one thing, the populations and sizes of the two countries are comparable. The cost of pacification could be staggering. By 2008, the cost of the Iraq War had reached $3 trillion and 500,000 people lay dead. Venezuela is in the Western Hemisphere, however. To occupy the country is to incur the risk of another wave of population displacement, some of which would very much affect us. Already, nearly 8 million Venezuelans have fled on account of the upheavals of Chavez and Maduro. To undertake regime change in Caracas now could result in a new massive wave of migration into America and the reversal of Trump's immigration policy. Bad as things could get on the immigration front, and however high was the cost of the Iraq War, the actual cost of this Venezuelan war could far exceed the cost of the Iraq War. This is because America's situation in the world has deteriorated greatly since the Iraq War. In 2003, America had the luxury of essentially fighting Iraq and only Iraq. Today, this Venezuelan war might pit America against an array of formidable opponents who don't take kindly to our holding the petrodollar system together by force. Consider first the balance of opposing forces. Back in 2003, Russia was close to prostrate and resembled nothing like the Soviet colossus. Today, Russia is a force to be reckoned with. Again, look at the trouble it poses for our European allies. Back in 2003, the BRICS alliance did not yet exist. Today, BRICS, with its 10 member countries, and BRICS, by the way, stands for Brazil, Russia, India, Communist China, and South Africa, and 5 other countries. BRICS numbers half of mankind and boasts a GDP that exceeds not only America's GDP, but the entire G7. We're talking about the United States, Germany, France, Italy, Japan, and a couple of others. It exceeds that of the G7. Then there is the U.S.-Red China balance. Back when we invaded Iraq, the GDP of the U.S. was 8 times larger than that of Red China. Today, the ratio is 3-2. More accurate and more frightening may be the ratio of economic strength as measured by purchasing power parity, or PPP. According to PPP, Red China is half again stronger than the United States. Consider as well America's domestic situation. Today, for one thing, the size of our public debt is a major problem. The size of our debt as a share of GDP in 2003 is nothing like this ratio today. It is night and day. Back then, debt to GDP was on the order of 1/3, a respectable peacetime level. Today, the ratio is north of 1-to-1, or in other words, the ratio of GDP, the ratio of debt to GDP, is at a level not seen since the height of the Second World War. What I am saying is that there is very little room for error on the financial side. If a war with Venezuela spread to include our major rivals abroad, which is entirely conceivable, Given the importance of Venezuelan oil, I've not even mentioned the enormous cache of rare earth metals that Venezuela possesses, that America could be facing financial ruin. What comes to my mind is the precarious situation of the British Empire after World War I, that is after 1918. Their debt was at a level, their debt that is to GDP, was at a level not unlike our debt to GDP level now. Their participation in the Second World War spelt the end of their empire and the sunset of their economy. What should we, the public, do in the face of the administration's Venezuela war? At the very top of the list are, I suggest, two things. We must uphold the Constitution, and we must overcome a gigantic information gap between ourselves and our leaders. Regarding the Constitution, the public must insist that a majority in Congress come to their senses and enforce war powers. Make it absolutely clear to our representatives that there is to be no further use of force vis-a-vis Venezuela without a declaration of war. Then there is the matter of the abduction of Maduro and of damages inflicted on his sovereign country by U.S. armed forces. As a first step, we ought to insist that Congress hold emergency public hearings on the merits of executive branch action vis-a-vis Venezuela, starting with the first U.S. attack on alleged narco boats. Regarding the information gap, the very first thing to do is to recognize that such a gap exists. Both the legacy media on the left and right and the government have not been forthcoming on a wide range of issues. This holding back on crucial information is, I suggest, most blatant concerning matters of high finance, which include the petrodollar system, BRICS, the need for the petrodollar system, our usurious banking system, and credible alternatives to the present banking system and present currency. How can we overcome or close the information gap? We, the public, must pivot, somewhat like the way that General George S. Patton pivoted during the Battle of the Bulge. The idea is not only to continue to do what we tend to do, grapple with what Rush Limbaugh called low information issues, such as the Second Amendment, but also grapple with high information issues, such as this affair in Venezuela, and especially with matters of high finance. Not until we gain a basic understanding of high finance, especially our present banking system and credible alternatives, some of which are far better than what we have now, I argue, can we truly understand, I would think, what responsible action to take in Venezuela, and by the way, in a lot of other places too. Last but not least, the public should demand of its leaders an answer to the following gut-wrenching two-pronged question. How is it that Communist China, of all countries, is able to advance its influence around the world mostly through the use of commerce, whereas the United States must resort more and more to the use of force to maintain its influence? Venezuela, among other places, furnishes this astonishing, embarrassing contrast. While Xi Jinping extended his mostly peaceable Belt and Road Initiative into that country, Donald Trump blockaded and bombed, invaded, and now wants to rule over like an emperor a foreign, sovereign country. This concludes my observations about America's latest war. Do you think I'm on the mark or not? Is President Trump doing the right thing or not? Is he fulfilling his campaign promises or not? And what about this proposal to pivot? Please let me know what you think in the comment sections below this video. I promise to respond to any comments left. And please indicate whether you like this video or not.